Thank you everyone for having me. It was really nice seeing Blaze and Cedric's talks. Um, my work is still I'm about halfway through my project, so a lot of this stuff is very preliminary. Um, I'd love to get some feedback on what I'm going to present today. I'm supervised by Professor Melissa Anderson at the University of Toronto, and that's where I'm doing my work. And I'm co-supervised by Meg Stewart, who's at Mount Royal. And this work has been supported by the Image Create Marine Geodynamics and Georesources Group. It's in collaboration with Hudbay Minerals, and it's been supported as well from the Manitoba Geological Survey. So I thought I would start just with a very brief overview of volcanogenic massive sulphide deposits and how they form. So there's a heat source at the base. And there's these extensional faults. They always form in extensional zones. And these extensional zones faults are primary ways where the water gets in, creates these hydrothermal circulation paths, picks up all the metals that are disseminated through here. And as the water rises up again, we have a temperature change and the metals precipitate. So this is a photo by Melissa Anderson that she took from the deep sea with some active, beautiful black smokers happening. And here's an example of a chimney that she sampled. And you can see the sulfides that have been deposited. So the morphologies that we get from it is we get these variable mounds and conical shapes. You get this highly altered feeder zone that's overlain by the stockwork and flanked by these debris aprons. And what's important is that they're zoned, the metals are zoned. So what's really fun about studying VMS deposits is because of that hydrothermal alteration, we get these great paleo way up features, these great platy alteration minerals that are also really good at recording post-depositional deformation systems. So by studying VMS deposits, which are very interesting for their source of zinc and copper and often gold and silver as well, they're also great places to study geodynamics. So they start out life here like this as these black smokers and these extensional zones. This is an example from Iran where you have a number of these VMS deposits that have formed in extensional zones. And then later they are preserved in our crust mostly through these orogenic processes. So these extensional zones, extensional faults are reactivated often as these thrust sheets. And the areas undergo metamorphism, which causes chemical changes, so recrystallization introduces some metamorphic fluids, so chemical remobilization, and they're also physically remobilized. So you go from something like this to something like this is often what we're mining. And so some of the stuff that I've been thinking about with VMS deposits is try to understand this change from here to here. And so to what extent do those faults and folds modify the architecture of these sulfide lenses? And I wonder about how the ore grades are controlled by these structures and how the progressive temperature, pressure, and degree of deformation are changing the ore grades. And finally, what is the result of what's the controls on the scale? Is this just something similar to what Blaze showed us? There's lots of just small scale remobilization, which is fascinating, or could we get sort of like on the kilometer scale of this remobilization? And what part of it's physical and what part of it's chemical? And so I'm using the Snow Lake district as my case study. So this is the Snow Lake area. This is the head frame at the actively mined Lalor deposit. It's located in western central Manitoba, and it's owned and operated by Hudbay Minerals. And the reason why this is so great is there's been a lot of really fantastic work done in this area that I'm able to build on. So I've got access to this fantastic database of geochemical and structural data. There's excellent underground exposures at Lalor and a core library of past and newly discovered zones in the area. And it's pretty typical of ancient VMS deposits. So what we learn here, we can translate to some of the other VMS deposits around the world. So here's the geology of the Snow Lake area. As I said, it's in western central Manitoba. It's part of the Trans-Hudson orogeny in here. And so this whole area that we're in is called the Flin Flon Glennie Belt. Some of you may be familiar with the Flin Flon deposits here in the Flin Flon assemblage. And here's the Snow Lake assemblage. So we're on the eastern edge of the Flin Flon Glennie Belt. This is a Proterozoic crustal accretion and collision, and it was happened about 2 to 1.8 billion years ago. And here's a closer view of the Snow Lake geology. So most of the deposits are hosted in the Anderson sequence or in the Chisel sequence. And you can see there's quite a few different VMS deposits. So the red here is copper zinc VMS deposit, the purple zinc copper, and the blue zinc copper gold. And so this is the LA here is Lalor. That's the deposit that is currently being mined. The rest of these are past producers. And there's a newly found deposit that's right around here. Should have some, there it is. And this is the 1901 deposit. So what I'm interested in is comparing these two, and hopefully it can give some ideas about some of those bigger research questions I was wondering about. This particular part of the Snow Lake sequence it has had polyphase deformation and metamorphism, at least 4 events. And the peak metamorphism reached amphibolite phases, so 4 to 6 kilobar and around 580 degrees Celsius. So here's a view of those deposits in 3D. So here's Lalor, this ore body here. It consists of several layered ore bodies. The ore bodies are all, you can see they're all fairly parallel. It's interesting. There's a lot of tight isoclinal folding that has happened, and they're all strewn along or strained out along the dominant foliation, which is about 318 and dipping about 35 degrees. And so here's the Lalor, these are the past producers, and this is the new 1901 deposit. And so I've just made a video here to, oh, it didn't work. Oh, that's too bad. There is a video here, but I'm not sure how to make it work right now. But we'll keep going for the sake of time. But I'm hoping what you could take away from this is that they are all they're all of these parallel things, and so we think that they formed at the same time, and they've all experienced the same deformation. So this is the working model that we have for how the Snow Lake deposits formed. So here's Lalor, Chisel North, and Chisel, and the 1901 would be it here. And the thought right now is that it's these 2 nesting calderas, and the siting of the VMS deposits are at these ancient extensional faults. And this is a cross-section of what these deposits look like now. This was done by Meg during her PhD. The black bodies here, these are the ore bodies. And you can see that they're all dipping towards the northeast. And they're all at this contact just below the Lalor Chisel fault. So there's been great amount of changes from what we think was deposited to how they look today. And so what I'm asking specifically about Snow Lake now is, to what extent do these faults that we see here, and in particular there's this one here, the Lalor Chisel fault that we're quite interested in, how has it modified the architecture of the sulphide lenses? And how are the ore grades controlled by these structures? And is the deformation in the alteration assemblage is continuous? And I'm wondering if there's evidence of strain partitioning. We would expect strain partitioning somewhere like this, with the big competency contrast between the softer sulphide bodies and then the stronger volcanic bodies. But we're still trying to exactly figure out how that's all related spatially. So the first thing I'm doing is returning to some areas at Lalor underground. As I said, there's been some great work done here. There was Antoine Cate, Seamus Duff, Judy Lamb. But since then, there's been this new exploration drift at the 950 level. and it's intersecting some 5 different ore bodies and a number of different shear zones. So Meg and I went down last August. We did some detailed mapping of this area, collected 19 samples, and I'm in the process now of analyzing these samples and making thin sections. So here's an example of, these are 2 touching ore bodies in sheared contact. This is a quartz-heeled shear zone, and then this is a zoomed in image of that quartz-heeled shear zone, and you can see these sulphides are along these fractures. Here's just another example of some of the shear zones that we saw, and some of the nature of the deformation that we saw. So there's these chlorite-rich shear zones and these internal sigmoidal-shaped deformation, and it's sitting up against these metavolcanics. And what we found is a lot of these highly deformed, highly sheared zones are where the gold is being carried. I then looked at the 1901 deposit. So this is the ore bodies here of the 1901 deposit. The ore shells were provided to me by Hudbay Minerals, and you can see it's been very well drilled. There's a ton of data available, and so I picked 4 drill holes that I went and logged, and we took a number of samples. We took 86 intervals, targeting the highest ore grades that we could find: the gold, silver, copper, and zinc. And so here's just another look of the 1901 deposit as we saw it and as we sampled it. And from this, 64 polished thin sections were made from the 2. So I'm just going to go through each of those ore bodies now. This is the stage I'm at with my work, and just noting the differences in each of the ore bodies. So starting immediately above lens 1, it's not mineralized. No surprises there, but there is some large metamorphic pyrite, and it's highly deformed. So likely this, it seems like the top of lens 1 is in shear contact with the neighboring metavolcanics, the hosting metavolcanics. Lens 2 looks like a very typical VMS ore body. It's mostly massive sulfides, lots of zinc, lots of sphalerite, some chalcopyrite, and there's some overgrowth metamorphic pyrite. There's some interesting calcite-rich zones you can see here in the core, and you can see through these areas too. And there seems to be some association with the calcite and the mineralization that I haven't figured out yet. And then in between lens 1 and 2, once again, we're seeing extremely high deformation. So it seems like these ore bodies are all, between each of the ore bodies, it's very sheared. There is some mineralization between these, but it's mostly these locally very calcite rich, very deformed zones, and lots of pyrite. Then in lens 2, this is where a lot of the high gold grades are. We're getting stuff like above 200 grams per ton in some parts. Very highly deformed, very low amounts of sulfur, less than 10% sulfides. And those sulfides are pretty variable. We're seeing pyrite, galena, pyrrhotite, sphalerite, chalcopyrite. I have had 3 whole hours on an SEM with one of the slides here, and I confirmed that a lot of the gold is contained in tellurides and in electrum. I think that this zone here is likely just a big deformation zone of some sort, just based on how it's looking, how deformed it is, how there's low sulfide mineralization. If I had to guess, if I was forced to make a statement about what this is now, I would say that this is a shear zone of remobilized gold. And then once again, we go in between lens 2 and 3, and we're seeing lots of deformation once again. There's some local massive chalcopyrite that I observed here. And I saw some of this some gold mineralization, and on the SEM, this looked again like mostly tellurides. And all of this gold mineralization you can see is along the cracks, and seems to be is definitely coming in after the minerals that are there. Lots of chloride here. The gold values seem to correlate with the lead and gold. So even though we're outside of the ore zone, we're right at the contact between the ore zone. It still has it is still grading. And then finally, lens 3, good gold and good silver values. Once again, these two images up here, they have over 60 grams per ton of gold, and they're very deformed. They have lots of this interesting carbonate appearing material. And then immediately below it, there's this massive sulphide area, and this has very low gold. So it seems like in this lens, at least, the gold has a negative correlation with sulfides. Really interesting deformation texture. You can see some really lovely kink bands, and yeah, it's very, the deformation seems very localized. I didn't pick up on this when I visited last August, so I'm returning to the site this coming August, and this will be one of my targets for just relogging and taking some more photographs and confirming where the deformation is and the mineral associations. And then finally, below lens 3, not mineralized, no surprise, and once again, very highly deformed. You can see there's these great deformation textures, and lots of garnets, and yeah, some beautiful deformation. So this is also something else that I'd like to revisit, and seeing a little bit further at depth and seeing how deep this deformation goes and if it increases as we get near zone 3. So this is a summary of the mineralization that was observed at Lalor by Seamus Duff. So he observed 4 different ore types, outlining the ore mineralogy, the associated gangue minerals, and his interpreted environment for these formation of these minerals. So I have seen this first ore type, and it's mostly in that that upper lens 1 with the massive sulfides. And I agree, most of the ore mineralogy is right, although I'm seeing a lot more chalcopyrite in this zone than what we saw in the Lalor. And the gangue mineralogy is the same. And then I saw this copper gold stringer, although there is, and I'm showing some right here, but a lot of the gold that we're seeing is not associated with copper. So I'm not sure how extensive this correlation is. But yes, we do see it. It is associated with pyrrhotite. It is associated with cordierite, amphiboles, and gneisses, and garnets. And then I do see this, a lot of the gold zones is closely associated with galena, with higher lead values. But I do not see copper here. So that's interesting that I need to explore more. And then finally, yes, most of the gold is in these low sulfide zones and highly deformed zones. So here's an example of some of the gold mineralization that was observed by Judy Lamb in her master's thesis. And you can see it's in these cracks in the minerals. It's mostly existing as electrum and petsite, the telluride. And here's some images that I've recently made for 1901, and you can see, yes, the same thing. The gold is existing along these cracks, and it seems to be here's some native gold, and it seems to be closely associated with the galena. And again, what's in these cracks? These are just some of the deformation textures I've seen. I think there's some grain boundary migration of the quartz here. There's definitely some rotated clasts. And so it seems like the gold grades appear to be related to the degree of deformation. So the more deformed it is, the higher the gold grades. I'd like to explore using electron backscatter diffraction. I haven't had an opportunity to do this yet, but I suspect that if we looked at something like these pyrite grains something that like what Blaze showed. We could see that this is an example from by Taryn Coward. She showed that this is an LASIP-MS scan of a pyrite grain, and then this is in the electron backscatter diffraction map, and it's showing the misalignment of the grains within this pyrite. So I'd really like to do that for some of these samples here, especially the high gold ones. The other thing that I'm working on is trying to determine the geochemical signature of all this. So I've got this huge database, and I'm working with IOGAS and Leapfrog and integrating them and running some multivariate statistical analyses, trying to I'm doing it on some known structures and then trying to predict where some unknown structures are and correlating that with the ore grade. So so far, I've been working with, this is called locally at the mines called the SRK shear zone. The SRK must have mapped this out for them. And you can see that it's got a strong correlation to calcite. So it seems that calcite seems to be an important element to this whole story. So just a summary in my next steps. I'm right now completing my petrographic characterization, confirming the mineral assemblages, and trying to quantify that deformation at the thin section scale. I've started a little bit of SEM work, and I plan to do more. And I'm trying to figure out, in particular, how the tellurides are distributed spatially. I'd like to do EBSD work and really focus on the deformation of the ore minerals. And then working at the deposit scale and working with my 3D modeling, while I know that the metamorphism is uniform, it's clear that the deformation is not uniform. So is the strain partitioning mostly along faults? Is it along the sulphide lenses or both? And how does this work tie into the noted correlation of the increased gold and silver grades? And could I use that to understand how the gold is mobilized? And is it all mobilized just from primary VMS deposits? Or is there some sort of orogenic contribution? And it's interesting, I think, that original copper gold stringer that we observed at Lalor is not present at 1901. And as I said, I'm tying this all into my 3D model and the base chisel basin scale work, looking at geochemical signatures and using multivariate statistical analyses. So that's everything. Thank you so much. Thanks again to Meg. She was a big help with this and ongoing support. Melissa and Hadbay for the information. Kyle Reed and Tanya Martins at MGS and Mike Hamilton also. We're doing a little side project on geochron work in the Snow Lake area. That's it. Thank you. Any questions?